What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking our Week 1 wide receiver fantasy football rankings, so make sure to tune in. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? We'll do our best to answer them all. And lastly, check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. Sign up for our free newsletter to get some extra perks. Details are in the description. But with that being said, let's get right into it. And as you can see, we have got our Week 1 wide receiver rankings pulled up. Note, we're going to be talking our top 30 wide receivers in terms of PPR scoring, so just keep that in mind. But without further ado, we kick it off with Tyreek Hill at the number 1 spot. And honestly, here you see Davante Adams comes in at number 2. It's pretty much a coin flip situation for me, which one you have, 1, 2. I think they're both obviously tier 1 wide receivers. The only reason I give the slight edge to Tyreek Hill is because I think the game flow will benefit him more so. The Chiefs versus the Browns, I could see that being the highest scoring game of the week. And I think that's going to be more competitive throughout the entirety of the game. So Tyreek Hill is going to be, a focal point there offensively from start to finish. I think he does have a little bit more big play ability. And last season, he obviously did establish himself as being more consistent. So that's the only reason here I have him a little bit higher than Davante Adams, who comes in at number 2 going up versus the New Orleans Saints. They've also got a good defense, a good secondary. But Davante Adams with a healthy Aaron Rodgers, those guys are unstoppable. He comes in at the number 2 spot. And I think this will also be a high-scoring game. But, my only reasoning for having Adams lower than Hill, I could see the Packers kind of pulling away from the New Orleans Saints as the game progresses. And then, maybe them switching to a more run-oriented type of offense, Davante Adams not having to be on the field as much as a Tyreek Hill as the game progresses. Coming in number 3, we have got Calvin Ridley of the Falcons. And yes, he's not your prototypical, high volume like a DeAndre Hopkins, Stephon Diggs, PPR type of wide receiver. But I like the matchup. The Falcons are continuously top 5 in pass attempts year after year. As long as Matt Ryan is there for the Falcons, Calvin Ridley will be just fine. And honestly, he was great last year without Julio Jones. I think that'll be the case again this season. I love his touchdown upside, his big play upside. And I could see a lot of points being scored here, back and forth battles, so I really like Ridley. Afterwards, Hopkins and Stephon Diggs, 4 and 5 respectively. I kind of have them in that similar range. I think all these guys are still arguably in the tier 1 list. For Hopkins, versus the Tennessee Titans, another game where I think it'll be very, very high scoring. And sure, you've got A.J. Green, you've got Christian Kirk, Chase Edmonds, James Conner. None of those guys are the most reliable. And when push comes to shove, Kyler Murray is going to look for DeAndre Hopkins in these type of games. He's going to be the focal point as far as wide receivers are concerned. Sure, the big play like 50-yard touchdown and being a big-time red zone threat might not necessarily be what Hopkins is, but he could very well get like 10-plus catches in this game, so I love the upside there. Then Diggs at the number 5 spot. Obviously a huge fan of his. Just a little bit nervous with this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. It's absolutely sensational, but I mean, last year the Bills still had a pretty successful outing versus the Steelers, and that defense, Josh Allen, looked great in the preseason, even though it's preseason coming off an MVP type of year. I think he continues, that trend, and Diggs is obviously the focal point of that offense. Curious to see how much action somebody like an Emmanuel Sanders, Cole Beasley get, but I think it'll be the passing attack here for the Bills that'll be the focal point, which is obviously a benefit for Diggs. Afterwards, A.J. Brown. I really like the wide receivers here in this Arizona-Tennessee game. Spoiler, A.J. Brown, in my opinion, is going to have a big, big role in this game alongside his teammate in Julio Jones, who I also have as a top 10 wide receiver. I think it's going to be back and forth. I think every offensive weapon for the Titans is going to be involved here, from Tannehill to Derrick Henry to A.J. Brown to Julio Jones, maybe even throwing a Ferkser in there as well. But Brown is still the wide receiver I would prefer for the Titans. Julio Jones, not saying that he's done or anything like that, but I just think he's the 1B to the 1A for Brown, higher touchdown upside as well. So I like Brown here right outside my top 6 wide receivers. Then Justin Jefferson, huge upside here versus the Bengals. The only thing that maybe you get worried about is like if the Vikings pull away here, which I could see, it becomes the Dalvin Cook show. Adam Thielen is also still there, very capable, but Justin Jefferson is the future and honestly the present for the Vikings at the wide receiver position. Huge upside. Maybe a little bit of a lower floor than you would like, but this defense can absolutely be had. I think Justin Jefferson, honestly, wouldn't be shocked if at the end of the week he ends up being like a top 3 wide receiver, because that is the type of upside that he has. I think the only thing that could potentially hold him back is, if Kirk Cousins is more so a game managing quarterback here, which is also a possibility. Next up, Keenan Allen. Yes, this is a very tough matchup versus Washington, but I think Keenan Allen, specifically in PPR formats, let me say that here, is going to be like a top 10 wide receiver option every single week. I think Justin Herbert is going to pepper him with opportunities. Don't get me started about Mike Williams or any of those other wide receivers. It's Keenan Allen, it's Austin Eckler. And even though Keenan Allen might not, have a lot of touchdown success, might not have that like 50-yard touchdown, something like that, I could see him going for like 10 plus receptions, close to 100 yards every single week. And to me, that qualifies for a wide receiver 1. Afterwards, Julio Jones of the Titans. I said it before with A.J. Brown. I really like the Titans here. I think Julio Jones is going to return some great value immediately in this first week. I'm not all that scared by this Arizona defense. I think it's going to be back and forth. Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if Julio Jones ends up having just as much success as A.J. Brown this first week. The only thing that maybe you're worried about is the chemistry that he has with a Ryan Tannehill, with Derrick Henry taking away some passing opportunities. But either way, I think Julio Jones will be very close to a top 10 wide receiver. Afterwards, we've got Terry McLaurin of the Washington football team going up versus the LA Chargers. I think in a similar situation as a Keenan Allen, McLaurin does have a very tough matchup versus a good Chargers secondary. But, I think still here he's going to get a lot of volume. He is the by far like best wide receiver that Washington has. Curtis Samuel banged up, Adam Humphries, more so of a role player. Yes, Logan Thomas and J.D. McKissick are still there, but Terry McLaurin is the guy, and I think he'll be in that range of close to like 10 receptions for 80, 90 yards, and he'll be right on the border of a top 10 wide receiver. Then DK Metcalf here at the number 11 spot for Seattle. I like DK Metcalf. I think that people are probably undervaluing Tyler Lockett a little bit, who at this point I have not that far away from DK Metcalf. And again, if you told me at the end of the week that Tyler Lockett outscores Metcalf, I wouldn't be all that shocked. But at the end of the day, I think Metcalf is the bigger upside play, higher touchdown upside for sure, more usage in the red zone, that more physical wide receiver. And I think either way, both him and Tyler Lockett are going to be kind of knocking on the door of a potential wide receiver 1 for the week. We'll see, though. Colts defense pretty stingy, so wouldn't be shocked if it's maybe like a slower start than we might expect for DK Metcalf. Afterwards, I've got 12 and 13, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp. Just going to go over them here together because basically to me, they are the exact same player. I think they have the exact same upside. The only thing that'll end up differentiating the one from the other is touchdown success. But in terms of stats, otherwise, receptions, yards, I think they have very similar upside. I think Matthew Stafford is a great quarterback. He's going to be able to find opportunities for both of them. And even though the Chicago Bears have a good defense, you could argue their secondary is that, position that's got the most question marks. But either way, I think they're probably both more so high-end wide receiver 2s, because I wouldn't be shocked if this is a lower scoring game, but they do have a nice little bump in terms of floor because of the PPR aspect. At number 14, I've got Adam Thielen. Even though a lot of people are saying that Adam Thielen is going to regress this season because of touchdowns, which I agree with, this is a great matchup here for Thielen versus the Bengals. Everything that I said about Justin Jefferson holds true here for Adam Thielen. I think he's going to have a lot of opportunities. I think he's still capable, and I could see the Vikings scoring a lot of points here. I think to some extent, you could argue that he could be a little bit more consistent than a Justin Jefferson. Obviously, nowhere near the same ceiling as a Jefferson, but Kirk Cousins does like to go to Thielen pretty quickly with those short intermediate routes. We'll see, though. I think this is a great matchup for pretty much all the offensive weapons for the Vikings. At number 15, I've got Chris Godwin versus the Dallas Cowboys. He is the Tampa Bay wide receiver that I would prefer to roster compared to Mike Evans and Antonio Brown, especially in PPR formats. And obviously, this is going to be a situation where it's going to be, again, touchdown dependent. If you get the touchdown, if you're Chris Godwin, then you'll probably end up being the highest wide receiver in terms of rank for the Tampa Bay Bucks at the end of the day. But I think in PPR scoring, he's going to get the most volume, which is what makes him the most trustworthy and the highest ranked. And also, this is a great matchup versus this Dallas defense. I think Tom Brady is going to have a very successful outing. And I think that it'll probably go Godwin, Antonio Brown, and then Mike Evans in terms of my preferences. Next up, we've got CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, similar situation to Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. I like the upside here, just not the best matchup right out of the gate. However, I do think potentially if the Cowboys go down, that just out of necessity, Lamb and Amari Cooper will both be force-fed the football, which is a good thing for them. I could see them kind of salvaging their days towards the end of that fourth quarter where they maybe get like a garbage time touchdown or garbage time big time play. But at the end of the day, I think they'll probably more so be mid-level wide receiver twos on the week versus a very stingy Bucks defense. Next up, we've got Deontay Johnson of the Steelers. I like the upside here. I've said this before. I think he is the wide receiver for the Steelers to own highest upside. He gets the most volume. This is a tough matchup versus the Buffalo Bills, but I do think that the Steelers are going to have to air it out a bunch to, keep pace with Buffalo. And at some point in time, Deontay Johnson will get his opportunity. I think he has the highest upside, big playability out of Chase Claypool and Juju Smith-Schuster. That's why I've got him here at that number 18 spot. Next up, Tyler Lockett comes in at number 19. Honestly, if you want to make the argument that he should be just a couple spots lower than a DK Metcalf, I would have zero problem with that. I have them in a very similar type of ranking. And in terms of expectations, wouldn't be shocked if at the end of the year that Tyler Lockett has more receptions than a DK Metcalf. Here, it'll just come down to touchdowns. Like I said before, I think the Seattle-Indy game could be a little bit lower scoring. And if you take away that, big play opportunity, the Colts are pretty disciplined. Tyler Lockett does get a little bit of a decline in terms of the rankings there. Afterwards, 20th spot here, we have got T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals. And T. Higgins is somebody that I've been saying for a while is my preferred choice for wide receivers for the Bengals. This is a good matchup here for him versus this Minnesota secondary. And he's the guy that I'm most excited about. If this game gets out of hand for the Bengals, they're going to have to look at T. Higgins as, or honestly, all those wide receivers as the way for them to potentially climb back into it. So I really like the pass catchers here for the Cincinnati Bengals in this week 1 matchup. Afterwards, Allen Robinson comes in all the way at 21 versus the Rams. I love Allen Robinson, don't get me wrong, but this, in my opinion, is a awful matchup versus the Rams and potentially Jalen Ramsey, which is a pretty scary thought. Yes, Andy Dalton is there and probably will provide a lot of volume for Allen Robinson, which will be his saving grace, which is obviously why I still have him as a top, almost 20 wide receiver. But I would say if you don't get a touchdown from Allen Robinson, could be a little bit of a disappointing week from him. Next up, 22nd overall, I've got Corey Davis of the New York Jets, somebody that I'm pretty bullish on. Actually, pretty bullish on all these Jets wide receivers this week, him including a potentially Elijah Moore if Jamison Crowder doesn't play. I am not scared of this Carolina secondary at all. I think it's a young and still developing defense. And Corey Davis, along with, like I said, Elijah Moore, I think are going to be the primary weapons for the Jets. Zach Wilson, I actually think, will surprise some people this week 1. I think this will be a higher scoring affair than people realize. Really back and forth. Honestly, wouldn't be shocked if the Jets win. Corey Davis has the highest touchdown upside here out of all the Jets wide receivers, and I like him as a sneaky top 25 wide receiver on the week. Afterwards, Antonio Brown and Mike Evans. I said it before, Chris Godwin is my preferred Tampa Bay wide receiver. At some point, I think all these guys for the Bucs more so in the low, mid-level wide receiver 2 category. If you want to make the argument that Chris Godwin should be ranked lower, I wouldn't argue with that. But in PPR, settings, I have Antonio Brown ahead of Mike Evans. He's, in my opinion, going to get more targets, more receptions. He's got the higher yardage upside as well. Like, the only thing that Mike Evans can tout over all these other wide receivers is touchdowns. But this week 1, I think all these 3 wide receivers are going to be viable in that low to mid-level wide receiver 2 range. That's why I've got both of them here where they're currently ranked. At number 25, Odell Beckham, obviously a huge name, somebody that maybe we've forgotten a little bit about. But this matchup versus the Kansas City Chiefs, I think that all these Browns weapons are going to have pretty successful outings, maybe more so than really any other week, because I, again, wouldn't be shocked if this is one of the highest scoring games of the week. I said that with Tyreek Hill, saying that here with the Browns as well. I think it's going to be back and forth, and even though the Browns are very run-oriented, at some point in time, they're going to have to open it up through the air, and Odell Beckham is still the wide receiver that I prefer for this Cleveland Browns squad. Then 26th overall, I've got Brendan Ayuk. Ayuk is a guy that I think should be the top wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers. It's a matter of, is he going to be healthy? And right now, the news is that he did return from his hamstring issue. And if he does play, this is an awesome matchup versus the Detroit Lions. Yes, the 49ers are a run-first team, but, I think they're still going to look the way of Brendan Ayuk. He was tremendously impressive his rookie season when he was healthy, and I anticipate much of the same here, especially versus the Detroit Lions. If you want to rank him a little bit lower because you are concerned of that hamstring, then I wouldn't blame you. I just really like the upside and the matchup here. Next up, Marquez Callaway, everybody's preseason darling for the Saints. Obviously, I'm bullish on him here, but I do think that Alvin Kamara can't just do it on his own for the New Orleans Saints. As much as I like him, somebody else is going to have to step up. And in my opinion, everything we've seen points towards Marquez Callaway. Jameis Winston, the great thing about him is he's going to air it out like nobody else. He's not afraid to do that. So whether the Saints are tied, whether they're winning, or whether they're down by 30, Jameis Winston is going to be throwing the hell out of that football. And I really like the upside for Marquez Callaway. Afterwards, Tyler Boyd at the number 28 spot. Right now, I've got him as my second overall Cincinnati wide receiver. I think he's actually a pretty safe option in PPR formats this week, and he could outproduce your expectations because, again, another favorable matchup. Might not get the yards, might not get the touchdowns, but I think he's going to get the volume, which in PPR is tremendously important. A good matchup here versus the Vikings, especially if, they're more so keyed in on guys like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. At number 29, I've got Russell Gage of the Atlanta Falcons, a guy that I've been hyping up all year long. And I think here versus the Philadelphia Eagles, not an awful matchup. And Russell Gage, the number 2 wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons. Sure, Kyle Pitts is there, but I think it might take him a little bit of time to kind of get it going. And Russell Gage showed last season he had the chemistry with Matt Ryan. And I really like him, especially if the Eagles focus on shutting down Calvin Ridley. And finally, Michael Pittman of the Indianapolis Colts. Without Naheem Hines, I think Michael Pittman is going to surprise a lot of people for this first period of the fantasy football season. The Seattle Seahawks secondary, I do believe it can be had. Not all that worried about Jamal Adams. I think he's more so of an enforcer than like a shutdown type of safety. So for that reason, Carson Wentz also trending towards playing. I think Pittman is going to get a lot of opportunities here, and I like him as a guy that could, really get you a lot in terms of bang for your buck and outproduce his ranking on the week. But with that, we wrap up this week 1 wide receiver fantasy football ranking breakdown. As always, let us hear in the comment section. Did you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at alldaypigskin to continue interacting with us there. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.